Hi, this is Jonathan Mamrell, and today we're here on the HR Engage podcast for another episode. And with me today is the always vibrant Roseta Jacobs. Roseta, how you going?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Good, Roseta. You have such a big personality. You've got such a great history in terms of your working career. You've done so many things, corporate, council, all types of stuff. So I could run this down. I could do a whole laundry list, but you're in front of us right now. So just tell us a little bit about yourself.
About me. Okay. I was born. That's a good thing.
Yep, that's usually a great starting point.
That's a huge benefit. But I think the thing that's unique about me, and probably the thing that's shaped who I've become quite significantly, is the fact that I was actually born in apartheid South Africa. That has been a major influence in the person that I've become, and even the life and career choices I've made. So I was born into apartheid South Africa, into a very, very large extended family. And at the time and that place in the world, opportunities were severely limited for people of color, especially for women. And as a young girl who was a bit mouthy, who was a bit boisterous, who was a bit opinionated, that wasn't good because you were told both by family, by community, by society, by law that you had to be less than, that you had to be quiet, that you had to know your place, which is always less than. So I grew up in that environment, facing those harsh realities that people that grow up with discrimination face, the systemic and societal barriers that were put in place to keep people of color separate and divided. I saw firsthand how the principle of divide and conquer can actually, how it works. It works really well. You separate people and you make them think that one group is better than the other, and it works really well. Fantastic system of social engineering.
You saw it firsthand how that strategy or that tactic essentially works in a much more real social situation.
Absolutely. But I developed at that time a ferocious love of reading. I remember when I was born, there was no internet. There was, we had a landline phone. There was no mobile phone.
We're not giving Rosita's age here at all, by the way, by these references.
And so, in the world I grew up in, there was no hope. You were born into a world of hopelessness, and there was no hope of a world without discrimination. There was no hope of a world that was better. And you thought, this was your lot in life. This is what was going to happen. And so along come I, and I go, no, surely not. There's got to be more. There's got to be more. And this can't be it. But my family, my grandparents, my parents, my aunties, my uncles, we were all being told that we would all die in apartheid. That was our reality. There was no future. That was it. And then I thought, no, life's got to be more. But if you live in that world, how is life more? There's no internet, there's no phone. The only newspapers you have is only propaganda newspapers. So that leaves you only with your own mind. That leaves you only with the books you can get your hands on. So I just read everything. And I think the biggest part that shaped who I am today is that thirst, that desire for knowledge and for learning. And I remember, quick one, I'm not going to spend too long on this, but at the time I was around 8, my father said to me, my father was a ferocious reader as well. Like every day of his life, my memory of my father is that he was always with a book in his hand, always, 100% of the time. And when I was around 8, he said to me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I'd like to be a lawyer or an architect. Because I love drawing, so I thought I'd be an architect. But I loved arguing, and I
Yep.
was opinionated. And I thought those were things that lawyers needed to be. You know, you needed to be argumentative and you needed to have an opinion. And my father said no. He said, no, you should be a teacher. And I said, I don't want to be a teacher. Like, I've seen teachers. They're in my school, and I'm not particularly inspired by any of them. I went to Catholic school, so they were nuns.
Yep.
I said, I don't want to be a teacher. And he said, no. I said, why? Why do you want to be a teacher? And he said, well, if you studied law, you would study South African law. And that would limit you to living the rest of your life in South Africa. He said, you need to do teaching because you can teach anywhere in the world. And you've got a message that you can give people as a teacher.
Yep.
And you can influence as a teacher. But this is bizarre. It was a bizarre conversation because nobody in my family had finished high school. Nobody had been to university. And certainly travel for people of color, travel outside of country for people of color, unheard of, didn't happen. So here's my father talking to 8-year-old me about travel outside the country, about working outside the country, about going to university. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. What I need to do is I need to learn. And that essentially is what shaped the entirety of who I became and who I am. Is a thirst, a desire, a love of learning and knowledge. It's shaped who I am. It's always been for me about what can I learn. And I still live my life today like, what can I learn? I want to learn something new every day. And I seek that. I seek that out. I seek that out from people, from children. I seek it out from older people. I seek it out from everyone. What can you teach me? So I'm greedy. I'm greedy for that thirst of knowledge. What can you teach me? And I learn from everyone. You go to the shops and you learn something. You talk to your children about how their day has been in school and you learn something. And so in essence, who am I? I am somebody who have suffered tremendous challenge and adversity, but it was necessary. It was necessary to shape who I am. It was necessary for me to become the person that I am. And so I don't dwell on that. I value that and praise that and acknowledge that as opportunities of learning. So that's in a nutshell who I am. I'm a mom. I'm a single mom, proudly so. I've got 3 beautiful kids, and life that's what life is about for me.
Well, I want to take that thirst for learning that you talk about, and obviously you come from this, there was some adversity to go through in your background. That thirst for learning led you down this path, this journey into human resources.
Absolutely.
Do you want to just give us a little rundown as to why you got into human resource and basically what you did, because you've got such a fantastic history in HR. So can you just give us a bit of a rundown on that?
Absolutely. How I fell into HR. I didn't choose HR.
Yep.
But life is like that. Things happen because they meant to.
Yep.
So my first message is embrace the adversity, embrace the challenge. It's if you couldn't deal with it, you wouldn't have it. Yeah. So how did I get into HR? My journey into HR. Well, surprisingly, despite every effort to the contrary, I was the first person in my family, my extended family, my extended family who actually went to university. And I got 2 degrees straight, one after the other. How did I do that? I won a bursary, or what you would know as a scholarship, to study.
Yep.
But that bursary was on the proviso that I could do any undergrad degree I wanted. But my postgrad work had to be in education. Okay. So I was like, righto. And, I found myself in education as a teacher. So I did double majors undergraduate work in psychology and English. why psychology? I was always fascinated by how the mind works. I was always fascinated by how people made decisions and what drove people. So I kind of went into psychology and then did the education bit and then became a teacher. I was a teacher for 18 months. I hated it. Hated it. Hated it. I discovered what I learned about myself as a teacher was that I am not good at imparting knowledge to children. I was only 22, so I was a child myself. I didn't know about anything, but I had this tremendous ego. I had this sense of self-importance. I had this great swollen head because I'd been to university twice. I got 2 degrees. And so I came out of that teaching experience. And my parents both worked at a university. And my mother was a cleaner and my father was a lab assistant technician. And I learned from them that if you worked at this university, you'd get 75% of your study fees.
Yeah.
And at this time, I was 22 years old. My drive was, got to get knowledge. So I thought, I've got 2 degrees, I need more. So I targeted this university and decided that I was going to get a job there because I could then study some more and get 75% discount of academic fees. And the 25% that you owed them came out of your salary, which you could pay off. So I thought that's what I needed to do. So I was a teacher with teaching qualifications, only 18 months experience. What did I know? In my mind, I knew everything. I knew the world. But then I did some research on the university. I went and spoke to some people at the university, and I discovered that they had a desperate shortage of people working in the secretarial space.
Okay.
So I thought, righto, okay, I'm going to become a secretary. I'm, 2 times graduate. Anybody can be a secretary, easiest job in the world. Anybody can do that. But I couldn't type. So I taught myself to type. And then I managed to persuade some poor, hapless person to give me a job as a secretary. So I spoke myself into this secretarial job. It was a maternity leave cover. And so she was away for 9 months. It was part-time, so I only worked 8 o'clock till 12 o'clock as a secretary to head of unit in HR. And so my boss had a business unit in HR, and I was his secretary. And that's how I fell into HR. I was a useless secretary, was absolutely rubbish at it. My first day on the job, I walked in there full of verve, like, I can do this, I'm a secretary now, that's an easy job, you've got to be really dumb to be a secretary. That lasted 10 minutes before the reality of it hit me. I'm not afraid to confess that first day on the job as a secretary, I cried my eyes out. I was the stupidest person ever. I had to ask everyone how to do things. I couldn't answer the phone. At the end of that day, I went home in tears and said, I'm not going back. It's the horrible job. It's the worst job in the world. Secretaries are amazing people because they must be so clever. I realized. So on that first day in HR, my ego took the biggest punch and it deflated. And that was my first lesson in humility, which is something that I've sought in my entire career. I've sought out people who I thought were humble. I've sought to learn from people who I thought were humble. And I've been seeking humility for my own growth ever since, and we'll probably touch a bit on humility later, but that's how I fell into HR. I was in that job 3 weeks. I learned very quickly. And then another job came up in HR as another part-time job. It came up in HR as a sort of generalist sort of HR person. And then they asked me if I wanted to do that job. So I was doing the secretarial job in the morning and this other little HR job in the afternoon, admin. And then I was in that job. I was doing the 2 jobs maybe about 6 weeks or so. And then a permanent job came up in HR as a loans counselor. And because I'd done psychology, they thought I could be a loans counselor. I knew nothing about loans. I knew nothing about counseling. But hey, so I got that job, and that sort of it gathered momentum, and I became sort of more HR generalist until I fell into the learning and development space later. Yeah.
And that learning development space, that is an area that you've got, I suppose you probably lean towards that learning development space a little bit more than the others. I mean, obviously you've got some great, vast arrays of background in corporate, in different types of organizations. But I just want to touch on that learning development a little bit, because for a number of HR people, or people in HR, or people in culture, they might skew towards one area. Yours is probably a little bit more obvious that you do go towards learning development. So why are you passionate about learning development, and why have you sort of gone skewed down that road?
I think it was probably because of a person that I had great respect for, and I won't say he was a mentor, but certainly someone that I had a significant amount of respect for. And when I was working at this university as loans officer, there was I faced tremendous adversity, especially I experienced firsthand real racism. Like, it was bad. And I could spend an entire podcast just talking on that one. But the short story is the director of HR was a man who was the first man or person of color that I had seen in a senior position. And in my experience, it was always people of color were doing gardening jobs, cleaning jobs, security guards, but we weren't director of HR. And he was. So that was certainly something for me. And I was like, okay, so I looked up to him. And then something really, really bad happened at work one day in my loans job, and I just bawled like a little baby. I just cried my eyes out. And he saw me, and he said to me, what's this about? I explained what happened. And he said to me, this is what he said to me. He said, if there was, and this, I share the story because it's important and it's relevant, I think, to the world and the career choices people make. And he said to me, if you had to choose any job at all in this university, what would that job be? Just choose one. And I couldn't think what it was. I was like, I thought he's just talking rubbish. And then he said, I'm thinking, for himself, he said, I'm thinking about opening a little thing called training. Now in South Africa at the time, education was something that was denied people of color. And he said, I want to do training. I want to open a training department. That's what I want to do. And it was a vision. It was a dream. And he said, I want to help people who's been denied access to education to break through the glass ceiling that they face in employment. And I think the way we can do this is through learning. And I was like, oh, okay, that's all right then. And he said, all right, you go off and you think about what you want to do with your career, with your life. And he said, I'll give you 3 days. 3 days came and went, and I never went back to him because I thought he's a director. Like, he was like 10 levels above me. Like, he's not really interested in my story. So I didn't go back. And he came to me and he said, I thought I told you to come back to me in 3 days. That was yesterday. Like, what happened? I said, you were serious? And he goes, yeah, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, have you thought about it? I said, yeah, I've thought about it. I said, but you know that thing you were talking about, that training thing? Maybe I'd like to try that. And he goes, you sure now? And I go, yeah, I think that would be fun. And he said, okay, I want you to go and do that. The condensed version is that out of that experience, setting up a training department, out of that experience, at this time I was 22 going 23, I was invited to be a contributor on a green paper that became a white paper that was tabled at Parliament around breaking down barriers and
Hmm.
breaking through glass ceilings and helping people to grow beyond what their educational disadvantage has given them. So I was a contributor to a white paper. I was asked to speak at conferences about breaking down barriers to give people opportunities. And and I saw firsthand, I created a program that had 45 people who were cleaners, gardeners, and security guards, and asked them, if you could break through the glass ceiling that had been created for you in your life, what would you like to be? And I set up a computer lab when that was a new thing.
Yep.
I
Yep.
taught people computer literacy classes. I taught them, they were illiterate, some of them, they were innumerate, some of them. I created literacy classes, numeracy classes, computer literacy. And I organized, negotiated with the university to give them 3 mornings off their work per week, 3 mornings per week, where I put them in the classroom to teach job-ready skills and gave them opportunities to work in positions outside the ones that they were in. And that, the personal satisfaction I got from that at age 23, and the absolute humility when people who were 50 years old, 60 years old, were coming to me to learn from me. I was just so humbled. And I had people who were 65 in those classes, and they never wanted to get a better job. All they wanted was to be able to read the Janet and John book with their grade 1 grandchild. I mean, it was just that plummeted, not plummeted, sorry, plummeted is the wrong word, catapulted me into the world of that drive, that thirst for learning. That's always been an influence in my life. And and it's about that empowerment. It's about championing diversity and inclusivity. It's about giving people a break, making people understand that there's a world that could be better, that they can do more, that there is more. And I think that's what drives my passion for HR, as well as my passion for the learning and development space. But that total knowing that you can make an impact, and the people you impacts others. So I think that's what gave me that drive to always sort of lean towards that development, coaching, mentoring. It's always been the thing underneath everything else. So it's sort of critical to who I am, really.
I wanted to ask you a question about that. You know, you said giving people a break. That break. That ability to take off, to catapult. And you sort of touched on it. That is why, learning development is one area, but it's why you actually are passionate about HR in the first place, and why you still are.
Yes.
I suppose I want to switch that a little bit, because it's a slightly different question. Is, well, why do you enjoy it? Because you've been in HR for a very, very long time. Mm-hmm. Is it still
very, very?
is it? I won't emphasize that too long. But is it because of the results that it provides? Is it the journey itself? Is it the build? I mean, there's so many aspects to what you do. What is it that you really actually enjoy about human resource and people and culture?
I think, just to touch on the first point you made about creating opportunity.
Yeah.
When I landed in HR because opportunity was given to me.
Yeah.
I was at the right place at the right time with the right people. And my director said to me, what is it that you want to do? And gave me that chance to think about it. He knew. He led me down that path. He knew what he wanted. But he wanted me to get there on my own. So I like to create space. I like to create opportunity. I love it when people come to me in HR as head of HR. When you're in learning, if you're head of learning, it's sort of they call it the fluffy, fairy, fuzzy, warm, fuzzy people that sit that side. It's not real HR. But when you get into a position where you become head of HR, you can influence all of that.
Yes.
And I love it when people come to me and say, I'm doing recruitment now, but I don't want to be doing recruitment. And I love the question that I can put to people that say, well, what do you want? What do you want? How can I help you get there? And when people come, so many people have come to me and said that to me in my career. I'm okay where I am, but I want to do something else. And sometimes that something else is outside HR.
Yeah.
How can I help you get there? That for me has been a drive. You never do it with the expectation that people are going to be grateful or that people are going to be thankful. Because I've got probably a misguided view on gratitude anyway. So I don't expect gratitude, but it's just that you can see people really open up. And you actually, probably know some of the people that I'm quietly referencing, where people come into an HR space and they buy the book and they do everything right, and they don't consider that within HR there's more.
Yep.
And so I think, and then you show them the world that there is more. And the world you show them is the world of speak, ask questions, seek knowledge, say that you don't understand, say that you don't know. HR people have a fear of saying, I don't know.
Yep.
You're not supposed to know everything. That's why you've got people around you. They know everything. And you just see people opening up to a world of possibility, that traditional HR versus contemporary HR, and even the type of HR that I do, which I don't think is traditional or contemporary, it's just me, it's about opening the world and saying there's more, and be greedy. Take it, learn it. There's nothing that stops you from being greedy. And that's what drives my passion, is that I feel that I can contribute. I feel that I can influence as head of HR.
Yep.
I feel that I can speak. And above all, I'm not afraid to speak, which is often a challenge that traditional HR practitioners face within themselves, that they're afraid to speak and they're afraid to challenge the status quo. I'm not afraid of that. I love innovation. I love being creative. I love problems. I tell people, bring me your problems. I love the problem. Why? Because it gives me a chance to be innovative. It gives me a chance to be creative. It gives me a chance to involve other people and say, let's look at this problem together and figure out how we can make it better. And you see people when they work on a combined problem, you see them opening up. You see their personalities open up. You see their minds opening up to a world of possibility. You go, wow, that's my buzz. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. It's just getting people to see that more is good and there is more.
There's a lot of early career practitioners, HR practitioners, are listening to this podcast. There's a lot of people have also switched from, say, operational or finance or something like that, or maybe a technical stream, and moved into the HR field for whatever reason. There's many reasons for that. So I want to sort of maybe take you back, time travel a little bit, and go back to your early career you. What advice would you have for the early career Roseta?
You will be tested.
Yeah.
You will be tested. Your ethics will be tested. Your values will be tested. Nothing will come easy for you.
Wow.
And why should it? Because if things came easy, you wouldn't appreciate it. If things came easy, you wouldn't value it. If things came easy, you surely wouldn't learn from it.
Yes.
So adversity is important. Adversity is necessary, because through adversity you find growth, you find strength, you find resilience. Advice to early me: don't be afraid to use your voice. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. Embrace your unique voice, because there will be times where you feel like you don't belong. There'll be times that you feel that you don't conform to fit into the spaces that have been created for you. And your voice, your perspective, your experience, those are your strengths. Even if you have even if you're starting in your career and you don't have that much experience,
Yep.
you still have lived experience up to that point. You still have a voice. And the biggest thing I would say to younger people starting in the HR journey is learn to know and understand what truly matters to you. Know and understand what your personal values are. Know and understand how your values align to the organization's values that you work and operate in. Because if there's even the slightest disconnect, that's not the place for you. And that's okay.
Yep.
Don't stick in a job for longer than you have to. The biggest lesson I learned, and it's a sad lesson, was that in one of my jobs, I was working in HR, and I worked with a lady who was in charge of the typing pool. And so I gave her the letters of offer, the contracts, and she would type it up.
Yeah.
And I liked her. We had a good relationship. And I saw her on the Friday, and she was happy and everything was good. And I came in. I started work at 7:00 at that place, and I came in at 7:00 the next morning, and she wasn't there, but there was another lady there. And I said to this lady, "Oh, for the sake of ease of use, I said to the lady, "Oh, where's Emily? She's normally here." And her name is not Emily, but I'm just saying. And this lady said, and I said, "And who are you?" And the lady said, "Oh, I'm a temp." I said, "You're a temp, so where's Emily?" And she said, "Oh, Emily died yesterday." And I was like, it's 7:00 Monday.
Wow.
Emily died yesterday, but they managed to get a temp in? Like, seriously? They haven't even told us?
Wow.
And so the biggest lesson I want to give to people is, if it doesn't feel right, don't hang around. It's okay to leave that job and find another job. Because you know what? None of us are indispensable. They will, if you've given them notice and you say, "I'm leaving in a month," guess what? The last 3 weeks of your employment there, the job ad will be up already. Why are you still there? So do what feels right for you. Live to your values. And if it doesn't feel right, you've got to do what's best for you as dictated by your values. Because, like, going back to the whole HR space, for me, living and working in the HR space is all about human behavior. And humans are unpredictable, and humans they're tricky, and humans they can be pesky, and they don't do what you want them to do. So you can only for yourself do what's right by you, that makes you think, "I can go to bed at night and be okay." And I think for young version of me, I would say, don't hang around too long where you know it's not the right place for you.
Roseta, that's some really good advice. And I suppose on the flip side of that, there's a lot of people also listening that are more experienced, more senior, have been in the game for a longer time. And this is more like peer to peer, right? So what are two big pieces of advice you would have for any person in HR or is currently in human resources and people and culture?
Irrespective of where you are in your journey, whether you're just starting out in HR or whether you are more experienced, it doesn't hurt you ever to seek out a mentor.
Yeah.
To seek out people that you look up to. It might not even be people in the HR space. It could be people that you just look up to, people whose values align with your own. For more experienced people, prioritize your self-care, prioritize your boundaries, because the more senior you get, you feel you've got to work longer hours, you feel you've got to prove more, you feel you've got to take more accountability, as you should. You feel that you have more responsibility, as you do, but also understand within that what your boundaries are. And understand what really matters and what's really important for you. The more senior you are, celebrate your wins, but through your team. Don't go around beating your chest like I did when I was 22 and say, "I am the big I am." No, it's if you win, it's not yours, it's your team's win, and let your team know that it's their win. Celebrate no matter how small it is. Don't take yourself too seriously, people. It's okay to laugh at work. It's okay to share a joke at work.
And for
For more,
those people who don't know Roseta and have not met Roseta, she loves a good laugh, great belly laugh. If you're watching this, you can see the big smile. She very much lives that. So
yeah,
that piece of advice.
laugh, be yourself, authenticity.
Mm,
People, if you're a leader in HR or in any space, you need to be
yeah,
authentic. Because if you tell people, hey, I just don't get that, I just don't understand what you are talking about right now, I don't get it. People respond better to you. They want
yeah,
to help you more. They want to make sure that you do well, because they see you. Um, my big advice: bring people food. Uh, People can't fight with you if you put food into their mouths. They can't argue if they got food in their mouths that you provided. They can't argue with you. So bring people food. And celebrate and believe in the power of learning. Oh, believe in the power of education. Believe in the power of growth, even for yourself. I've sat on interview panels where we were recruiting very, very senior people.
yeah.
And I love asking the same question, which is, what have you got left to learn in this job? If we gave you this job, what's still left for you to learn? And if people say nothing, I've got nothing left to learn in this job,
Mm,
um,
it's hard.
you've always
Yeah.
got something left to learn. So open yourself up to that. You've always got something left to learn.
Um, I suppose going on that learning, because learning is a very big theme in your world.
Mm,
Flipping a little bit to more the adversity side of things,
mm.
what's the biggest challenge you're now facing in human resources? Essentially, what's keeping you up at night, and how are you tackling it?
I think the big challenge, and look, it's different for everyone, um, but it depends also on the industry you're in.
Yeah,
Um, if you are working in local government, for example, it's so regulated, so highly regulated. There has to be a clinging to policy and procedure and law, which you have to do. But I think the biggest challenge for me is seeing the human through the policy, um, understanding that that policy was written by a human.
yeah, yeah,
So, understand that that policy is a guide. And I think if you can get yourself to the point where you understand that organizational values drives behavior, then that's an easier way to get people to do the right thing.
mm,
Um, and it's a simpler way and it's more easily understood. I love asking organizations that I work with, how many policies do you have? I love it. And some people will say 20, other people will say 600. And the more truthful amongst us will say, I don't know,
yeah,
1,000.
yeah,
Um, Navigate through that to the human. Use your emotional intelligence and get through that. Another big challenge I have, or that I'm seeing now, is it's almost, I don't want to say it's a fad, but there's almost now a growing sort of, we need to become more, we need to show that we are diverse, and we need to show that we are we practicing all the principles of equity and inclusion. And organization I worked with said, oh, we firm on diversity and inclusion, we firm on it. And I said, okay, what does that mean for you? And I found it funny at the time, and they said, "Oh, we want to know what the numbers are between men and women.
yeah, yeah.
How many men, how many women?" I was like, "Huh? That's your take on diversity and inclusion, men and women?" I said, "All right then, we got some work to do. That's good." But I think if you want to be a strong advocate for inclusivity, you know, build and create an environment that's genuinely inclusive. Build and create an environment where people are free, or not afraid to ask questions,
Yeah.
where where people, if they don't know how to language, say, I don't know what language to use. You know, so, like for me, some people might say, "Oh, you a colored woman." I don't like that. So you can ask me how would you like me to how would you like me to reference you if you need to reference me in terms of color. Ask questions. Don't be afraid. How do you overcome it? As a leader, lead by example. Create in your own world the space where people feel included.
Yep.
Share your stories. And you don't have to be a leader in HR. You could be anyone in HR. You could be anyone anywhere. But within your circle of influence, create a space to include people. It's not hard. And it's something I say to people to think about when you think about inclusion. When you go to a wedding or you go to a funeral, there are speeches. People make speeches. And usually there's an MC who conducts and the MC is normally the person who thanks everybody, right? So everyone, the MC will say, "I'd like to thank Jonathan because he turned up today, and I'd like to thank, and so they do that. But who's the one person at those events that gets forgotten? The MC. Nobody says thank you, MC. Now, if you want to talk about inclusion, have that in your mind.
Yeah.
Make sure you include everyone. You can't just say, I'll include the ones that's politically correct to include. Because inclusion and diversity, it's about feeling. It's about how you make people feel. You've got to make people feel. And I think that's a challenge for us in our world today, is how we make people feel. So my suggestion is lead by example, be humble, share stories, create programs that targets those areas that you find challenging, and then create some accountability around that. So it's not just words, and how you use words and how your language is important. I think there's tremendous power in language, and we set the narrative, and we can, and we should. So be mindful of how you set that narrative. I think those are just challenges for me, but obviously that's to a little bit by my lived experience, by my worldview, and of course changes in law, which you know far better than I, Jonathan. You understand the changes in law and how organizations and HR people have to struggle with changing their mindset around the changes in law that's coming that affects HR. So get on that bandwagon, learn, figure out what those changes are. Speak to people like Jonathan. He knows this stuff. Ring him up and say, "Hey, Jonathan, there's a change coming. What do I need to know? Come and talk at my organization. Come and share. Come and teach. We need to know." So I think those are the challenges right now. It's certainly that sort of the softer side with that diversity, inclusion, organizational culture stuff, as well as the law. Those are certainly challenges right now.
The two big challenges, and obviously they get a lot of playtime right now, a lot of media playtime, diversity, inclusion, and obviously the IL law change. And there's so many, right to disconnect, psychosocial hazards, even stuff around casual employment and sexual harassment. There's just so many changes. I suppose you come from a very, there's a very diverse background, both in terms of your learned experience, but also your, I suppose, your company background or what you've done in terms of work, learning development, general HR. There's just so much there. You have a very unique approach to how you deal with things, especially when it comes to leading people. So, and maybe you've touched on it, but maybe there's something specific that you wanted to talk about. But what is the one thing about human resources that people might disagree with you about?
I think for me, the thing people might disagree with me on.
Oh, by the way, this is PG. By the way, this is a PG show, Roseta. So don't use any of this colourful language right there.
No, I won't. I won't. I think what people might disagree with me on is my view that people are inherently good.
Okay.
And that's hard for people, HR people driven by policy. And when you know, Jonathan, when you get those industrial relations cases coming in and the
Yes.
cases are a bit juicy and you go, ooh.
That's not the sound I make, by the way. But yes, I understand the philosophy of what you're saying. Yes. Yep.
And you go, oh, this case is juicy. I think sometimes for HR, because we get so trapped
Yep.
by the pressure from all angles. You get pressure from the CEO. I want to change the culture. You get pressure from managers and your stakeholders or your clients who
Yep.
says, oh, there's a people problem. You working people, go and fix it. I don't want to
Yep.
fix it. So you get pressure in that direction. You get pressure from there's a skill shortage. You in HR, it's your problem. You fix
Yep.
it. I can't do my job if I don't have the people, and it's your problem. So you get this pressure from everywhere. And the biggest criticism leveled against HR people is the criticism of you are the police. We don't trust you because you're always going to side on the side of management. You are not, you don't really, you use the language that you think we want to hear, but you don't really mean that because you're really on the side of management. And we can't trust you. And confidentiality in HR, rubbish, that doesn't exist. So those are the criticisms that get leveled at HR. My view is yes, that happens, and that happens probably in most areas and most sectors and most industries. But within HR, we tend to get to a point that we huddle around each other. The ones we can trust in HR, and we have a go at. Oh, did you see so and so? Stole some money, or so and so did this, and I think the what I want to put out there is to be mindful of that behavior. I know it's easy to get into it. Because you feel you need to vent, you feel like you also wanna let go of some of the stuff that you own. Be mindful about some of that because I think for HR people they might go, she's a bit who out there in la la land when I say that people I believe are inherently good. Bad people are not bad people, but they do bad things and they behave badly. But that doesn't mean that that person's not an upstanding member of the community. It doesn't mean they don't go to church on Sunday. It doesn't mean that they don't have kids and a wife and a family. It just means they made a wrong decision. They made a wrong judgment.
Yep.
So I think what's where I'm probably a little bit different is that I believe that every interaction you have with every person that comes into your sphere in HR in the first place. And I when I'm leading people in HR, when I am the HR manager, the first thing I talk to my team about is you always treat people with dignity, irrespective of what they're accused of having done. You always treat people with respect. And you always make sure that they feel that they've been treated with dignity and respect. I think that's important, is how you make people feel. And I think the other thing that people might challenge me on and say it's a little bit different is that I think everybody can learn from their mistakes. I think failure is important.
Yep.
I think failure is necessary. I think you need to create an environment for yourself and for your team where you're able to speak freely and openly about failing. Because without failure, you can't innovate. Without failure, you can't create. Without failure, you can't do better. Because if we always did everything right all the time, you'd be living in a pretty boring place. So I think if you put those messages out to your team that you are, obviously you're not chasing failure, but you are open to having a discussion around where things could have been better. where you could have done better, even if it's your own failure, where you create that space for people to feel that their dignity is maintained and intact. You create that space where people feel respected, even if the outcome isn't what they'd like, even if the outcome isn't what you'd like, even if the outcome isn't desirable for anybody involved.
Yep.
People still need to feel that they are respected. And I think in short, the answer would be try to exercise emotional intelligence above policy. Policy is a guide, values drives behavior. So try and work your way through all the red tape and all the bureaucracy and all the stuff to find your way to the heart of the human that you're dealing with.
That's some really good thoughts there. And I think you've always been thinking very differently about people and culture that I've experienced, very different thinking. And I think there'll be some people out there listening that would agree to some of your stuff. I mean, there's also people that would be definitely shaking their head going, no way. But I think it's at least, I think what Roseta's trying to say is at the very least, keep your mind open to those thoughts, because there's something to say about keeping your mind open to new ideas. Challenge those ideas, like those new ideas are there, challenge them, but at least think about it. I think that is definitely something HR and human resources, people and culture, that really needs to move a lot quicker in terms of that more open thinking, not just what's hot right now or what's been put out in the media, but also thinking more than that, because there's more stuff coming in the background. You've got technology, you've got stuff around wages and payroll. There's so many different things now coming. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to discern, like, what do I put my priorities? Where do I focus?
Absolutely. And on that note, people, they if you always do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. And then don't become frustrated that things aren't changing.
Yes.
If you're not prepared to challenge the status quo, if you're not prepared to ask the question, or if you're not prepared to think bigger, then don't be dissatisfied with the red tape that you're facing. Don't be dissatisfied with what you've got. How many times both you, Jonathan, and myself, and we've had discussions about this so many times, we will say to you, "Oh, we've always done it this way. We've done it like this for 20 years.
Yeah.
How's that working out for you?"
Yeah.
If it's been working for you, why are we having this conversation that there's a problem right now? So remember that.
Just as a microcosm on that, Roseta, you look at some of these underpayment wages claims that have come out, the Commonwealth Bank, and there's a few others. It actually comes down to a lot of that thinking. We've been doing this the whole way through. No one can really explain how it's done, but this is always how we did it.
Yeah.
Woolworths, I think, is another example.
Yeah.
This is always how we did it. No one really sort of understands or can explain it away, and just took a couple of people to just inquire about it and go and just start that process. And all of a sudden, it's just unwound so quickly because the thinking didn't go further than this is how we always did it, and no one's really touched it.
It comes down to one word. Like one word. If anybody in your team comes to you as their leader and says, "Roseta, here's a policy. Help me understand why." That's the word. Why? And if you can't explain the why to something, then you've got to ask yourself some other questions. Like, why are we doing it this way? I don't know. We've always done it that way. Okay. So encourage your people to ask one word. Have one word on your whiteboard, in your staff room that just says why. Why are we doing this? And if you can't answer it, then you know where your problems are.
That's good. That's good thinking. Now, I want to change track a bit because it's tradition here on the HR Engage podcast to get into our rapid fire questions. So basically, very simple rules, Roseta. I ask you a question. You tell me the first thing that comes to your mind, okay? All right? You got it?
Okay. I'll try. Okay.
So, first question, what is your favorite movie?
Oof, that's a hard one. But okay, I'll say Dune because, and I don't mean the new ones, but
Oh, the old June.
Any Dune because I had read about all the Dune books up to the sixth book. By the time I was between 8 and 10, I'd read all of it. And when the movie started coming out, I was like, yay! So any Dune movie,
Any June movie. That's awesome. Now, I know you were encouraged very early on to go overseas and holiday. So, what is your favorite holiday destination, Rosita?
I've got to say, I know it's a bit. People are going to say it's a bit, been there, done that. But for me, it's Paris.
Here we go. Yeah. Of course.
I can't help it.
Paris is lovely. It's a beautiful place. Yeah, awesome, Paris. And have you been to Paris recently?
Not recently, I'm afraid to say. I just really haven't had the time. So, but my daughter apparently was asked at school a few months ago, what is the one thing she'd like to do? The one most important thing she'd like to do soon. And she said to go to Paris with my mum. So
wow.
I feel like I owe her that.
Yeah, you better get that savings on and get the saving for those euros because the euros are pretty tough right now. Now, apart from family and friends, who has inspired you the most? And I think you sort of alluded to it, but who's inspired you the most?
Three people. Two people that I know personally and one that I know from a distance. The first person is the person I spoke about earlier, my director of HR, who was the first person of color that I saw in a senior position, and the guy who created space for me and created opportunity for me. The second person is my CEO that I worked with in Melbourne, who just believed in me. I could go and tell him any far-fetched idea, bizarre sometimes, and he'd listen to me for 10 minutes and he'd go, yeah, let's try that. I'm still friends with him to this day, and we still talk often. And recently I said to him, you let me get away with doing so much stuff that was so out there, that was so, like so innovative. It worked. It was fantastic, tangible results that we could see. We could see results on the bottom line of the business in terms of dollars. We could actually see the stuff I'd worked on impacting the bottom line of the business. But at the time I suggested it to him, it was so far out, so innovative, so out there. And he believed in me and he said, yes, I'm going to go and do it. And I said to him, why did you do that? Like, why did you just trust me? And he said to me, which was very humbling, he's one of the other people in my life that I look up to as a person who teaches how to live in a humble world. And I always said one day when I grow up, I want to be humble like him.
Yeah.
He doesn't agree with me, of course. But I said to him, why did you trust me? And he said, are you daft or something? I said, what do you mean? He said, it had nothing to do with trust. I said, well, why did you give me all this money to do all these things? He said, because you had a history. You had proven yourself and you had a history at my organization of everything you did and everything you touched turned into magic. And so I'm a businessman first and foremost. I'm not here as a charitable organization. I'm here as a businessman. And over the years that I worked with you, you had proven to me that the things you worked on and the things you touched was going to make a difference to the bottom line of my business.
Yeah.
And so it was with full information that had nothing to do with trust, that I listened to your ideas and gave you the space for those ideas because it was based off data, which was really eye-opening for me. I just thought, yeah, I'm coming with a new fandangled idea, and he goes, yeah, go for it. And according to him, it had nothing to do with that. So it was interesting for me to have that conversation with him years later and say, why did you do that? And he said, I'm a businessman, and you proved you could increase my bottom line. And the last person that really inspired me, that someone I met but don't know, certainly is from South Africa, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and his unwavering commitment to truth and reconciliation, and certainly the power of humility in leadership. He was the chair of South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission that that was established at the end when apartheid fell. And for me, he just embodied the belief that truth is the cornerstone of freedom, truth is the cornerstone of healing, and humility in leadership is such. If you lead with compassion and understanding, people will want to be with you, not because they have to, but because they want to. And I think he certainly inspired a lot of because I sat and watched most of those interviews and the proceedings in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and you could not sit through a day of that without crying, and just to see that grace and that humility, and how having such grace and humility it rises him up as a human. So I think those were people that certainly influenced my thinking.
Fantastic. So what is a thing you do outside of work that you are passionate about, or just sort of keeps you going?
Keeps me going. Okay, music.
Okay.
Music.
Yep. What's up, music?
Music. Outside of work, music, anything with arts. So painting, drawing. I play 3 instruments. I love singing. I'm a pretty rubbish singer. Pretty rubbish.
But you love it.
I love it. Doesn't stop me. I play 3 instruments. Some of them well, some of them not so well. I love drawing. I love art. I love painting, and I manage a reggae band.
Okay.
Which is different.
that is different, because my next question up to round this up was, tell us something about yourself that people don't know about you. So, managing a reggae band, is there anything that sort of tops that one?
I've had another reggae group approach me to say, "Can you manage us?"
So there's a second reggae band. That's about
possibly a second reggae band, but it's fun. It's different. Most people know about me, except the people who know me really well, would know that I probably own in excess of maybe 500 pairs of shoes. I stopped counting at around 400. I stopped counting. I didn't stop buying. So
the counting stopped, but the buying is continuing.
So I don't know how many pairs of shoes I have, but
wow.
I've got a room dedicated to shoes.
So that's reggae bands, 3 instruments, and in excess of 500 pairs of shoes. Wow. I suppose closing it off, we've got so many listeners, mostly in the HR and people in culture space listening to this. So if you could recommend a book, movie, TV show, or podcast to listeners, what would it be and why?
A book, certainly The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I'm not sure if I pronounced his surname correctly.
Yep.
But it's the journey of Santiago, an Andalusian shepherd who dreams of finding some hidden treasure located near the Egyptian pyramids. And he then sells everything he has and embarks on this quest to find his dream. So in the book, it's a dream he has. And I think for us as HR people, this book teaches us that to find your true calling is the key to living your fulfilling life. This is, you've got to take your HR's hat and the space that you own in HR, and translate that message into the importance of understanding and embracing your purpose within the organization that you live in and the world that you stand up in. I think the world that you stand up in is probably more important than the world that you work in. And I think follow your dreams, focus on your well-being. The well-being and the development of your employees is important, and not just for your immediate team, but for the organization that you serve. You don't choose to work in HR because it's glamorous. You choose to work in HR because you feel a desire to serve. I think it might not be true for all HR people, but certainly for me, and I think for most HR people, you choose this career as a desire to serve. You're going to be the first person they beat up on you know you're going to be the first person they scapegoat on. You
Yeah.
know that you're going to be the first person they blame, but you still do what you do. You still show up every day and you still serve. And I think this book, The Alchemist, is a message to us all that sometimes the dream is where you start. Maybe it's not in Egypt, maybe it's within you, and find your purpose, I think, is the message. And once you understand your purpose, live your purpose. I will on this to end this thing about this thing about finding purpose. I want to end on something I've said in speeches that I've made when people have asked me to be a guest speaker at events, and it's something that I hold very dear to me, which is, when you come into this world, you come in naked. You're totally naked when you enter, and you own nothing, and you have nothing. There's only one, and when you leave the world, you leave with nothing. And the only thing you have between the time you enter and the time you leave is this giant invisible clock that's strapped to your back. And nobody knows when this clock goes in reverse. And you don't know when it's going to stop. Nobody knows that. And everything you've worked for in your life, the house you think you own, well, you don't own it. The car you think you own, you don't own that. The furniture you think you've bought, you don't own that either. The money you think you've got in the bank, you don't own that either. Because you know why? Because that stuff you've accumulated merely for the sole purpose of having other people fight over that stuff when you leave. Because you ain't taking that stuff with you. So the only thing you have is your time. And that's the only asset, your true asset you have. That's the only true value you have. That's the only thing that you truly own is your time. So make your time count. Make your time be meaningful. And make decisions around your time that says, if I continue to work for this organization for another 10 years, am I going to be happy that I've invested my time asset with this organization? Would I be, when I'm lying on the journey that's about to exit the world, would I look back at this experience and say, I've made good use of my investment, of my asset? And I think for us as HR people, it's easy for us to become so subsumed in the world that we live in that we don't stop to ask ourselves those questions. What is my purpose? Am I living my purpose? And am I using the gift of time that I have as best as I can? And I think that sort of wraps up for me the ethos and the principle around that book, The Alchemist. I know it's a long answer to what's supposed to be a rapid fire question, but I think that sort of just remember who you are and what matters to you.
I think that sort of leads us that, you talk about time and that inspiration. I mean, I usually ask, at the last question is there a moment of inspiration like to leave us with? But I think you really covered that with
but
that.
I'll give you one. And
yeah, okay,
one,
yep.
There's one I live by too, and it's a quote by Maya Angelou. And she was the mentor to Oprah Winfrey. And she said, and people have heard this many times, I know, but it's something that I think speaks to the heart of everything, is that people will forget what you've said. People will even forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think if you remember that you've got to be true to yourself, true to others, and live true to your values, then you will remember to always leave that impact on people where they don't forget you simply because of how you made them feel. And it's the same in reverse. You remember people based on how they made you feel.
I suppose that time and impact on people, that the value of time and I suppose the value of impacting people, that's so intertwined, and it's very much part of your story, part of your journey, and what you've done. I think some great tidbits there as well for even those early career people in particular, that like if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't match your values, it doesn't really, in terms of match that time issue that you're talking about, then move on to something else, try something else. And I think the other thing you're talking to with more experienced or people that have been around for a bit more time is to be open to different ideas and to not necessarily just accept that, but to test that, of course, still go through your due diligence process, but to be open to it as opposed to being stuck in that rigidness. Because I think you're alluding to that there are so many things now that's happening in HR and in the workplace.
Absolutely.
That the rigidity is going to be a struggle.
Absolutely.
To keep that equilibrium, it's going to be too difficult going forward, and there will need to be movement in some way, and you'd rather be at the forefront of that and thinking about that as opposed to being behind and trying to catch up. And I think that's the other point you were trying to tell people in the HR and P&C space.
Absolutely. I mean, you summarized that fabulously and wonderfully, because that's what it is. You know, you can't do. The world is changing so rapidly. Even in my conversation with you today, I started out by saying I did not have the internet as a child. Yeah. And can you imagine our children without the internet?
Yes, it's different, completely different.
I mean, the world has changed. And I'm not that old, let me just say.
Again, we have not disclosed Roseta's age, and you haven't got any hints from today at all?
No hints. But the world changes that fast. So we've got to own and lead the changes that's coming, even if we can't see it. AI, the world of AI. Oh my goodness, what an impact that's made this year. I'm not even talking last year, this year, the impact that AI has made. And people are already saying, well, is AI and robots going to take over humans? No, humans are always going to be humans. We're always going to need creativity. We're always going to need innovation. We're always going to need thinking. But you need to give humans the correct steerage. And you need to give humans that guidance and the space to allow humans to explore and to contribute. And I want to just sort of wrap up for me on this whole conversation around values. You know, humans carry values. Values drive behavior. Behavior can give you, the values behavior can give your organization a groundswell of people mostly behaving in the way that you would like your organization to behave, to set the culture. I mean, in my experience, I've been lucky enough to have taken over 4,000 people through a values, particularly organizational values journey. And I've seen the changes that can be made to organizations when organizations embark on a true values journey. And I think that probably would summarize it way down to, if you're going to take humans and say to humans, let's the robots do what robots are good at doing, which is automation, so that they can free up time and space for humans to do what humans are good at doing, which is innovation. Then give the humans the tools. And if you've got an organization of, say, 2,000 people, how do you get all of them to behave the way you want them to behave? You drive that through organizational values. And a lot of people haven't come onto that way. They talk about values, they put it on the wall, but they don't see the connection between driving organizational values to drive behavior, to see the culture you want, to create the innovation that you need for humans to keep thriving. Because we need innovation for humans to keep thriving. And a lot of people haven't made that connection yet to that values journey. It's much deeper than just saying we've got values. It's so much deeper, and so much more powerful if people truly get to understand what that looks like and what that means. So, that's sort of my
Roseta. Roseta, thank you so much. It is it's been great to have you on the HR Engage podcast. So I'd just love to thank Roseta Jacobs for coming on board. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. I love nothing more than talking, Jonathan.
So that's another episode wrapped up with the HR Engage podcast. You're with Jonathan Mamerel. Thank you very much and speak soon.
Thank you. Bye.